right, hi guys. So for this week, we are going to be talking about movement in our art, and that can mean a couple of different things. One type of movement in art can just be something that kind of leads your eye around your paper. So if you're using something like you have red all throughout your artwork, and so it moves your eye all around your paper, that can create a movement of the eye. Today, for this project, we are going to be creating or implying actual movement in our artwork through a series of dots or lines around the figures that we've drawn. So for this project, as always, you can use whatever materials you have available and want to use. So you could use crayons, markers, colored pencils, paint. You could even cut out things in collage. That would be really cool. For my project today, I have chosen this really bright green paper, and I'm going to choose some bright colors for my lines and dots around my figures. You can also choose to draw whatever you want in the middle of your paper, and we're going to be creating movement around whatever you decide to create in your art. So it could be figures like I've done here. I've chosen two figures that are dancing underneath a disco ball, because I figured they would be moving around a lot. Dancing is really movement based. You could also do an animal, you could draw your own hand, you could draw an object of some kind, you could draw leaves from outside, you can draw a bunch of different things, but be thoughtful about how that object would be moving if it was moving in space, okay? So like I said, I've done two figures on this colored piece of paper, and I just went over my pencil lines. I started with pencil first until I got it right, and I made some mistakes or some oops that I fixed. And then I went over it with a black marker, okay? So now I can see my figures, the outline of my figures really well. And today I'm going to be using paint, and if you have paint at home, this is a really fun project to do with paint, but you can do the same thing that I'm doing with markers, and it turns out just as good. So I'm stirring up this purple a little bit. It separated just a little and was darker than I wanted. And I'm going to be doing paint dots around my figures today. And for that, I'm using an old pencil that I don't really care about ruining the eraser on. But you could also just use the end of a paintbrush or anything kind of skinny and round. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start going right next to my figures and kind of tracing around my outline, but I'm going to be doing that with dots. Now you could also do this with lines. You could draw colored lines around your figures, and that would look really awesome too. But watch me, I'm going in and I'm just making a series of dots, and I'm starting with one color and I'm dotting it all around my figure. And then I'm just going to keep going around and around with different sorts of colors. And you'll see when I'm done with this that those rows of dots or rows of lines create a sense of movement around my figures. It makes you think they might be moving. So their bodies kind of look like they're moving. But these dots and lines help imply some movement in our artwork. So I'm going to keep going with this purple, and then I'm going to switch colors. And I think my goal is to keep going until my paper is pretty full of dots around my figures. So here we go. And then when I'm done with one color, I'm just going to take my pencil to the sink and I'm going to rinse off the eraser. Now, if you're using the back of a pencil to stamp your dots and you're using paint, it will ruin the end of your eraser even if you rinse it off. It's just never going to be the same. So if you're using a pencil like I am, be sure it's one that you don't care about ruining the eraser of, or just use the end of a paintbrush. All right, now I'm going to go in with my next color. I think my next color is going to be this really bright pink. All right, so you can see that there's movement starting to happen around my figures, even more than when I started. The figures themselves kind of look like they're in motion, but these dots are really helping us connect the fact that they are dancing and that there's movement happening around them. I'm keeping my dots super close together, you can see, and I'm also following along the shape of my figures really closely. So that's going to help it look like these figures are in motion again. And you can do the same thing with line. If you just want to trace around your figures with different colored markers, That would give you the same effect if you're not wanting to use paint. All right, so now I'm all done. I could keep going all the way to the edge, but I kind of like how you can still see the outline of their bodies. Even on this very last row, it still kind of looks like they're moving. So I'm just gonna leave these corners to be my nice green paper. Now, the tradition of dot painting actually comes from the Aboriginal people, who are the native people to Australia. And they do this kind of dot painting to imply movement in their artwork. And if you have a grown-up's permission, I would really recommend finding a video online on YouTube of these Aboriginal artists doing these types of dot paintings, because theirs are enormous. Sometimes they cover a whole floor, and they use these very long sticks to dip into the paint and then stamp all these tiny dots. And if you liked watching my time lapse of me doing my dots, you're gonna love these. Sometimes I just watch them when I'm bored because it's really soothing to watch them do all these dots. But their work contains a lot of cultural symbols and traditions that are important to their culture, but they do use these dots around some of their symbols to imply that those symbols are moving, are in movement. So I hope you guys have a lot of fun deciding A, what you want to draw on your paper this week, and then B, if you want to use lines, if you want to use dots, you could even use kind of a pattern going around your figures if you want. And like I said, you can use a variety of materials. You could do this same dot art with just a marker. It might take a little longer to draw all those little circles, but it would still turn out looking really cool. So you can use a variety of materials this week. We are so excited to see how you incorporate movement in your artwork, and I'll see you next week. Bye.